All right. Well, welcome, five-star real estate agents. This is the February 16th. We're going to be reviewing understanding inspections and point of sale transactions. And I know that all of you have so much fun when it comes to inspections and trying to control your clients. Uh, it can be the worst time or the best time of a transaction. You either know that you might be able to get to the finish line, or you're going to say, well, looks like I have to start all over, and it can be quite miserable. But that's what we do, right?
It
So
is.
we're going to focus a little bit on well and septic inspections, and then we're going to move slowly into point of sale transactions and what does that mean during a transaction. Now, you should be able to react. If you go to the bottom of Zoom, there's a little react button, and with a thumbs up, I kind of want to know just offhand how many of you, when it comes to well and septic inspections, that you always get them inspected. Or do you allow your client to say, no, I don't need it inspected? Looks like we got a lot of thumbs up that yes, they're doing inspections. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen a lot of people who waive inspections on
Mhm.
this, and we're going to get into some concerns on why we probably want to advise not to waive an inspection. But when it comes to private well and septic inspections, my question to you is when should you have a well and septic inspection performed? My answer, always. Very simple,
Yes.
always. And
Yes,
what's
right.
amazing is I have seen recently a war story here that a buyer puts in an offer. The listing says that it's on city sewer, city water. Okay. They get to the closing.
Okay.
It's on a well and septic system. There's no city water, there's no city sewer. The person just bought a home now with a well and septic. And further to complicate things, the township never recorded a lien on the property because the seller was notified 5 years ago that they needed to go from a septic to city sewer. It was never discovered. So let's get back to well and septic.
Yeah.
Just food for thought. There's a lot of things out there. If you're not sure whether something is on city sewer or city water or if it's well or septic, call your local municipality. It should be a good all around first call to the city and local municipality about well and septic and any type of point of sale. And now we're going to get into point of sale a little bit here. But
Hey,
again, we're still focusing on well and septic
hey, Eric,
inspections.
can I interrupt a
Yes,
minute?
please
When
do.
does that call need to go? When do I need to make that call? I'm going out to list the property tomorrow. Should I be making that call ahead of time?
I would.
Okay.
Or also make sure that you talk with your client first.
Yep.
If you need to get a water and sewer bill, if it's city
I like
water
it.
and sewer,
Okay.
if there's no city and if there's no bills coming in quarterly, then it might be a well and septic. But yes, I would always get a call,
Good.
make that phone call before you go
Thank-
listing. And as a
thank-
buyer, if you're going to be writing on a home and you're seeing something, put it in inspections. Make sure you're doing your due diligence on discovering the well and septic.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's good.
Now, there's always a question that comes up as who's responsible for ordering and paying for these types of inspections for well and septic. And it really depends on your purchase agreement language. You'll need to look and see whether the seller's going to be paying for that and whether the seller has to perform. Because normally it will state the seller will pay for a well and septic inspection, and then they will provide you with details of that inspection, which then once you receive, you have a timeline to respond by. Now, there's a caveat here in the language, and everyone always misses whether a septic tank should be pumped or not. Every single PA, I shouldn't say every, Many PAs don't address whether the septic tank should be pumped.
Mhm.
If that's important for your client, you should
Mhm.
write it in the purchase agreement. Doug, how many times have you been involved in transactions where you see someone come back and say, well, they never pumped the septic tank. They
Yeah.
couldn't really do a true inspection. They only opened the lid and looked and said, well, okay, it wasn't pumped, so we couldn't really see the whole
Yeah,
tank.
yeah, absolutely. More than not. It's interesting. That's a great question, Eric, because it's one of those things that, we rely on that purchase agreement, obviously the language in the purchase agreement to kind of dictate direction for us. But again, when it comes to pumping, that's where, especially in broker support, that's where we get a lot of calls from the agents that say, "Hey, is it my responsibility as the seller to pump this? Is there language in there that says I need to do that in?" A certain amount of days. Do I even have to do that? So again, to your point, that's one of those things that, again, that conversation can't happen too soon, in my opinion.
Definitely. And we also will say, here's a field rule. If your buyer wants an inspection, write it.
You muted yourself, Eric.
Probably a good thing. So here's the so here's the field rule. If your buyer wants an inspection, write it. If your buyer wants the seller to pay for the inspections, write it in the PA. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. And same with septic pumping. We can always put in there that the seller shall have the septic tank pumped within blank days of acceptance and provide paid receipt and inspection findings to the buyer. There should be something drafted in there for the pumping of that. And by pumping the septic tank, it will ensure proper inspection and proper documentation of the septic condition. You can't truly get a full septic tank inspection if it's not pumped. Now, it's curious because I will have some inspectors say, well, it's not necessary to pump the tank. Don't worry about it. I mean, okay, but I would want to definitely make sure that that tank is pumped and that they're checking the drainage fields and that it's in working order. If there's any type of failure of a system or, hey, it's still working, but they recommend it being replaced, now you need to really sit down and have a conversation with your client. Is your client willing to take on the risk of potentially having to pay for a new septic tank at could be, 8,000 up to 20 grand, depending on location and how big the septic tank is going to be? They need to have that conversation, see what type of risk they're willing to accept.
Yeah, Eric, Rory made the comment that make sure that you write into your purchase agreement that you want a well and septic tank inspection both, because one without the other, as you've just described, is really kind of a waste of time because you need a full picture as what's happening in that system, not just as the water goes in and moves through the system, but what happens as it enters the tank.
Right. So this is a perfect lead into well testing, right? What's the importance of testing a well? Well, we really want to make sure that the well is being tested. And what do they do? Well, we're testing for water. We're testing to make sure that it's working properly. We're making sure that it's pumping properly, that the big blue bladder down in the basements are working properly to get proper water flow. And we're testing for coliform, the coliform bacteria. We're testing for E. coli bacteria. We're testing for nitrates. Now, that's common language in the purchase agreement, those three items. You're always going to typically find nitrates near farming land. So don't be surprised if the water tests come back and you have high nitrates near farmland. That's normal. Is it a concern? Not for adults. You can bathe in nitrate water. It's not going to harm you. The problem is you don't want to drink it. Adults, not so much a big deal, but young children, definitely a problem. This is why reverse osmosis systems can help alleviate that problem if you're going to be doing any drinking water, ice. You can hook up an RO system to your freezer ice machine to your drinking water. So just be mindful that there are ways to Correct. High nitrates. And same with arsenic. Uh, I mean, I don't know how many times we have a huge area in Michigan with arsenic, cadmium, lead, copper, and certain issues in areas that PFAS that we just don't address in the water. So it's something that maybe your client wants to pay for it themselves. I don't know if it would be a reasonable request to have the seller pay for all of that. But again, this is a negotiation. How bad does someone want to sell their home? But it also gives a peace of mind to someone, or at least bring it up to them. Hey, there's other things that you can test for. What do you want to do? Leave it on them. Don't make the decision for your client. Just give them the information. Let them decide how best that they want to move forward.
Hey, Eric, I have a
And then,
question.
yes,
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand and I don't see that feature in here anymore. I feel like it used to exist. Anyway, I'm working with a buyer right now and we just went and toured a property that he's really interested in. Um, we're working on listing his house, so it might be a little while, but the listing agent just went ahead and did water testing and septic and sent us the results just in case, right? But they did not pump the tank. So they did the testing, sent us the results. The pictures are there. You can see the tank is full. Like they sent the camera down. And in the notes, it says tanks should be pumped every 3 years. If this one hasn't, it should be pumped soon. That's what the report actually says. But then it says, lid looks good, baffle looks good, whatever. So if we go ahead and write an offer on this house, I'm going to ask for another inspection, right? Like that's not sufficient.
yeah. So this was something later in my talk that I was just going to come up to, but you brought it up now, so we'll address it. A past well and septic inspection is not a legitimate replacement for the time once you get a purchase agreement signed by buyer and seller. The purchase agreement dictates that that seller needs to now order a new well and septic inspection. Not a past one from a month ago, not a week ago. If they want to jump the gun, that's on them. But once you get that purchase agreement signed, it states in there that they will order an inspection, a well and septic inspection.
Now, would
Now,
you accept
both,
the well one? Because like the water one looked good. They sent that out, all the results came back fine. But the septic is where we have our concern. So would it be okay to say, you know what, we'll take the water one, but septic we're gonna want you to pump the tank first of all, and then actually look at the whole thing.
yeah, it depends on how much risk that your buyer wants to assume.
Okay.
Again, we can only go based on what the purchase agreement states, which says that the seller will now order a well and septic tank. If it's a week ago, I would probably tell my client, yes, I don't have a problem with accepting the results of this from a week ago. But if it was over 30 days ago, guess what? Septic tanks fail anytime. Wells can fail at any time. This is why once we get under contract, everyone now has to perform, and there's a deadline to meet, meaning that if you don't like something within those inspections, that you can now ask the seller to make a repair and a way for your buyer to get out if needed, if the seller is unwilling to make a repair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Eric, just a quick question. If you are working on this sales side, so what do you advise your seller if they want to move fast? Do you list the house and then order it right away, or do you wait if time is an issue?
I would wait. And the reason being is because you don't know what the buyer is going to be asking of you. The buyer could come in and waive inspections, right? Even though we wouldn't recommend it. But if you were to get it beforehand, it doesn't mean that the buyer has to accept it. So once you go under contract, the law is clear in that purchase agreement that the seller is now required to provide a new well and septic inspection report.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be putting your seller at risk of having to pay for two of them within maybe a matter of days or a matter of weeks.
Thank you.
Otherwise, your seller would be in breach of contract for failing to provide those inspection reports based on the purchase agreement. Doug, I know you never run into that, do you?
No, no. Well, and it's interesting because I had one yesterday and they were saying the same thing. This is a seller saying, hey, would it be a good idea because it takes forever to get, the evaluations back and everything started if it's done with a local health department. Wouldn't it be smart for me to go ahead and do that up front? And I echo what you just said, Eric, because it just kind of sets the stage. You don't know down the road if what they're going to be asking for. And you could end up doing two evaluations. So to your point.
Hey,
I
Eric,
have I have a question. Oh, sorry.
it's okay. I
Before
was
that,
just,
I was just saying, I need to call on Rich here because he had
yeah.
raised his hand, and then I'll take the next person.
Yeah.
You got to watch water testing too. I saw somebody is it different for VA, FHA? You have to check with your lender. And if I know that the Kalamazoo contract states that we just check for E. coli and nitrates, I think, Eric, but
Form, E. coli, nitrates.
right. But FHA also wants nitrites. They want lead. They want other things. So if your seller's going to do this before, they're going to have to do it again. So I'm going to ask my seller to do all those testing if I have an FHA buyer when we go back in and say, okay, they also have to test for these other items as well.
Yeah.
As far as the septic system goes, remember that's a system. So in order to break down the solids that are in there, you have to have a biological system. So to pump it down completely to do testing is usually you're going to tell a lot of people that are testing it are going to say, don't do that. If it doesn't need to be pumped, don't pump it. Don't mess up that system.
That's kind of what I was going to ask too. I think it's Ottawa County requires that you do not pump it before inspection.
Yeah, it depends on each company will either say yes, pump or not. So that's why when you talk with them, they definitely you'll have different reasonings behind their logic, which is also different from the health departments. So sometimes you're not going to always get the same answer from every single company, but when you're doing your inspection, follow the lead of the expert because we're not the experts in that.
Yes, and just to follow up on Lindsay Schaub's question about VA loans, it's really, Lindsay, whether you're FHA or VA, it really just depends on what the requirement is going to be. Crazy enough, I've even had a FHA requirement for public water because it was near Flint and Fenton and had water that came from there. So sometimes you just get crazy requests. There's just almost just not a standard, but I would say it's normal and customary for VA for it to be required, but not mandatory every time.
Yeah, and keep in mind that when we are talking with the other side, whether you're a listing or a buyer agent, and you're having negotiations with regards to what needs to be done with the well or septic, I mean, it's okay to have a phone call or an informal conversation. I would try to avoid texts when you're trying to negotiate with someone because you can't read into the whole message of the text. It might come off very rude, or it might come off short. It might come off where they've misunderstood what your intention was that you're asking. And also those types of things that they don't satisfy contractual notice requirements. So written documentation protects all parties and ensures compliance with the contract terms. So just ensure that everything should be in writing and that you get verification proof from your client what they want to do. Now, Doug, I want to switch over to point of sale,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting.
Hey,
And
Eric, quickly, I
yes,
think Scott had his hand raised earlier.
yes,
I
please.
don't know
I'm
if
sorry.
if he's
I
still.
can't see everyone on the screens.
It's okay. Scott, do you still have a question?
Well, it's not so much as a question as just a way I try to maximize the value of my seller's house. When we meet for the very first time, I drill down through a set of questions, and one of them is if they're not on public sewer and water, I ask when was the last time you had the septic tank pumped, not completely emptied, as the other gentleman said, just pumped. And you either get a shoulder shrug or we've never had it. And you want to discover that before you go live and you have a ready and willing and able buyer. Everybody knows the first people that show up at your houses are the motivated buyers. The sharks show up later. So I've never had any inspection company say, well, shame on you, you had the tank pumped, because they want to look at the baffle of the tank. And if there is a problem with the tank, I want to address it with my sellers before we have a buyer. And then I also ask them about their furnace and air conditioning. When's the last time you had that service? And if they've never done it, you get that scheduled. So it's one less thing that you have to navigate through during the purchase agreement time, the inspection period, as Eric would say.
Yeah. And pump cards, if that's a requirement for some of you, make sure you get the pump card as well. Doug, in
Yes,
your
sir.
area, what do you deal with a lot of in real estate when it comes to selling a home or a property?
Well, when we're talking about, go ahead.
Is it a POS? Not the other type of POS,
Not that
but a
POS.
point of sale.
Yeah. So let's keep it high level here, people. High level, point of sale. It's interesting because you're picking on a guy that just didn't do this properly the last time. Let me shut me down there. Different municipalities obviously have different requirements as far as point of sale. Over here in the Spring Lake, Grand Haven, Muskegon area, there's this little city called Ferrysburg. And I just sold a property not too long ago. Actually, it goes back 6 or so months ago. And I forgot to call the city right away, do my point of sale, find out if that's required in the cute little city of Ferrysburg, which it was. Guess who didn't do a point of sale inspection? Right? So wonderful representatives of Star Title gave me a call and said, hey, we got a problem. Think about 6 months ago when you didn't do this. Probably time to do this. The new buyer was getting these wonderful little love, I call them love letters, little letters from the city saying we never did a point of sale inspection. And it could be as little as, like they said in Ferrysburg, it was smoke detectors. It was just some small inspections that had to be done. And it could have been done in 15 minutes as you kind of started into the process. So shame on the listing agent, Doug Hale, for not calling the municipality and saying, look, folks, we've got an issue here. I think there's a point of sale inspection that needs to be done, different than a home inspection. We all know that, right? And lo and behold, I learned a lot through this, folks. So if you don't do anything else when you go to list a property, pick up that phone, call that local municipality, and again, get some guidance and direction from them. So that was my learned lesson there in the cute little city of Ferrysburg. So don't take it for granted. So
Yeah, so there are multiple types of point of sale. There's not just one type of point of sale. I mean, there might be, as Doug mentioned, a smoke detector compliance certification point of sale.
mhm.
There might be a certificate of compliance inspection point of sale. A certificate of compliance is typically a building or planning department will certify a property that it adheres to all the zoning, building code, safety, and maybe even subdivision standards.
Yep.
And it basically ensures that the home is it's safe for habitation. There might be property maintenance inspection point of sales. There might be safety compliance verification point of sales. So we don't know what these are. You have to understand that there is no one guideline for a local municipality. These aren't county driven. So we need to really be assured that many of these inspections are not by county. They're by the local municipalities.
Yeah. Yep.
So you can't just go by county-wide. It's going to be each little city, each little local municipality. And
It's a nice little opportunity for them to gain a little extra cash too. So I always like it when
yeah,
in my market they're called certificate of occupancies, different than a typical certificate of occupancy, but it's called a certificate of occupancy, and it covers things like backflow of valves on your spigots on the outside of the house. It can be a little chip in the ceramic sink in the bathroom. I mean, these things are over the top. Furnace inspections, roof letters, all kinds of things that are nice little surprises if you're not a pro in your local market. So become a student of the market, and it's our responsibility to know these things. And as Eric just said, man, it would be really great if there was a list that said, oh, if you're selling in this market or this market or this market, but it really doesn't exist. So become a pro, know your point of sales, your time of sales, your certificate of occupancy, or whatever it might be in your local market.
Hey, those
So-
of you that work in Garrar too, sorry to interrupt, Eric. Those of you that work in Garrar and along the lakeshore here, I know the West Michigan Regional obviously typically assigns the responsibility to the seller. So that's on the seller no matter what. And yes, Doug Hale forgot, so I wrote the $75 check out of my own checkbook, folks. So, but that was after the sale. That was kind of backwards. So make sure that you do those things as Tracy said up front. So.
Yeah, so the point of sale or POS, you might also might be also referred to, like Tracy said, a TOS, time of sale.
Yeah.
So a lot of these are interchangeable. But I wanted to circle back real quick here. Seller provided inspection reports and buyer waivers when it comes to well and septic. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that the buyer is not required to accept a seller provided inspection, and that the seller provided inspection reports are really informational and do not replace the buyer's due diligence. And any risks that are associated with relying on the seller's inspections could include, maybe there's limited inspection scope that the seller did, maybe a different inspection standard that was done by the seller. There could be potential conflict of interest because the seller wants to do something beforehand and maybe not be so thorough, but also pretend, hey, look, I'm proactive trying to do something when they're completely incompetent and inept still. You represent the buyer. You have the buyer's best interest. Sometimes we don't care what the seller provided. You're going to perform the way that your client wants you to perform. We're not going to be dictated to by a listing agent, in my opinion. Now, if a buyer elects to waive inspections, if they're willing to accept those inspections, make sure that the buyer has acknowledged that they've been advised to obtain independent inspections, but they're waiving their right and they're willing to accept the seller's inspections. Get something in writing that you've told them, hey, look, I still encourage you to get your own inspections, but if you're willing to accept this, then you're aware that we still recommend that as a buyer that you get your own inspections done. That will prevent you from a potential liability if a lawsuit comes to fruition. And some of the best practices that agents should be looking at is, one, identify private well and septic systems immediately and ensure proper inspection language is included in your purchase agreement. Again, I'm going to revisit this. Not all purchase agreements talk about pumping. Is that important? If it is, put it in there. Have proof, have documentation, and then who's going to pay for it? And then specify, the septic pumping and water testing requirements. If you want additional water testing, what is it that your buyer is asking of the seller and who's paying for it? And that you're going to be getting proof of it. And make sure that you're following your deadlines carefully. And that if you have a request, once you get the reports back from the seller on well and septic, if there's something that's deficient, make sure that you're getting a request in for corrective action from the seller during your time frame, because the seller will then have a certain number of days to review this. They might just ignore you and say, well, I don't care what the request said from the buyer. I'm not going to do anything. And then it's going to go back to the buyer to determine whether they want to accept the home as is or terminate. And then make sure that you have compliance certificates obtained when required. And then document all buyer decisions regarding inspections, whether they're going to waive them, or whether they're going to rely on seller provided reports. It's so important. Documentation, documentation. Without that documentation, you're going to be in a he said, she said. Your client's going to be emotional. They're going to hear you, but they're not going to listen. They're going to think you said something else. You told them, hey, I recommend that we get this inspected. What did they hear? Oh, I can't wait to close.
Yeah.
Can't wait to close.
No.
Document it, email, give them notification. It will save you a lot of grief. Let me run through a couple things here. Like in the city of Holland, they do have a smoke detector certificate of compliance prior to the transfer of residential. It's really just to verify compliance with smoke detector safety requirements and residential safety standards. City of Muskegon has a certificate of compliance inspection prior to the transfer. It may include general property maintenance compliance, exterior safety conditions, building code compliance. Seller typically must apply for inspection and correct any violations required by the city prior to insurance of the compliance certificate. So again, it's important that if this is required, that you state who is paying for it. Typically, the seller has to pay for it because it's ultimately the seller's responsibility. But guess what? What happens when you guys close? It never gets done. Who's paying for that inspection now? Yeah, the buyer or buyer agent or potentially listing agent, right? The listing agent. Good thing Doug didn't disappear because Doug could have just silenced everyone and said, "No, not my problem. It's buyer's problem."
Yeah. And
But
boy,
Doug's a stand-up guy. He would never do that. So,
and boy, was
he's going to
Doug
take care of that.
was Doug foolish in that too, because the seller said, "Didn't you know a lot about that, Doug? Shouldn't you have known that?" And I said, "Yep, should have."
Yeah.
Oh,
City of North Muskegon, housing compliance inspection certificate.
yeah.
So again, there
Eric,
are so many counties in Michigan that do not impose a POS inspection. They just don't have them. And you're not going to see it.
Make the call. Make the
So it's
call.
the local municipality that will verify that will tell you what needs to be done.
hey, Eric, Melissa has her hand raised.
Yeah, I'm going to open this up to some questions, Q&A.
Go ahead, Melissa.
If you can unmute, or Doug or Tracy, if you can look at chat, see who has questions.
I just unmuted Eric. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
So,
Welcome, caller, to the 5-Star Real Estate Live Morning Hour. How can I help you?
thank you. This is perfect. I'm so glad that you're doing this. This has been on top of mine. I had a situation recently here where the buyer wanted to make an offer on a property that is very old, and I contacted the broker because basically in the description, it basically says they want offers that are at taking it as is. And that's what he said. And he was very transparent. But they had a tight timeline on the purchase agreements. It was like 3 days, and the deadline was they all had to be in like that Thursday at 4:00. And so I talked to the buyer and said, I don't, there's going to be some situations here with the well and the septic and the water. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. The property is decrepit, like just this side of condemned. And they said, who pays for that? And what do you mean? And what could that be? And look, I'm not the expert, right? But what I'm getting to is what the buyer wanted to know is, well, how much is a well? How much is it going to cost me to replace the well? Well,
$5,000 to $6,000.
But so I guess my question is,
Septic could be anywhere from 10 to 20.
Yeah, right. So you're going to get into all these numbers. There's all kinds of other things too. It's like this, they're basically selling it as we
RO system that you need because the water's contaminated.
Yeah.
2,500.
Right. So on and on and on, along with all the other things with the property. So what I'm getting to is there is this tight turnaround on the offers, which has created this sense of we got to get in here and we have to put something compelling in front of them. And you said it, Eric, too. We don't really say, hey, waive all the inspections. Yeah, just go in there as is and take it. You know you're going to have to spend a lot of money on everything, you name it. The well is just a piece of it. But I was just working with a different client that's an investor who he purchased a property in Santa Barbara, and he had gone through with the intent to tear the property down. And he said the entire time the broker kept saying to him, it doesn't matter, you're going to tear it down. It doesn't matter, you're going to tear it down. This person happened to be head of construction of Apple stores. I mean, this guy's a builder. He knows what he's doing. And he said he kept listening to that thinking, well, I guess you're right. I am going to tear it down. Well, then he got into it. He didn't tear it down. And the property's a mess. And you know, the zeros don't matter at that point. He's like, how did I do that? How did I say, I know better? How did I listen to that in my, that you're going to tear it down. You're going to tear it down. And then he didn't. So, and Tracy and I talked about that a little bit, that do it, get the inspections, pay for it yourself, know what you're buying. But back to this decrepit property that, I mean, it looks condemned. The buyer starts saying, how much, how much, how much, how much? But the point was that there was this sense of urgency that was created by the broker in the listing that we're going to get all these offers and you have 3 days. And so in that situation, we are the advisor. You know, you got to take a pause, whether it's 2 days or 4 days or whatever. I'd like to hear from, you know, our deal doctor expert about that sense of urgency of trying to help the buyer take the pause and make sure that, let's talk
Yeah,
about
it's called the emotional knee-jerk reaction, in my opinion. You have highly energized individuals, buyers who love the wheel and deal. They have the mindset that they never want to miss out on a good buy. The fear of loss is greater than actually buying something that would work for them.
that was real.
And it was, yeah. So the broker went fishing and he snagged the big one. That was easy. Yeah, you're going to tear it down. You're going to tear it down without even thinking. The person was like fearful of a loss, when instead, as an agent said, hey, there's plenty of properties out there. You don't need to jump on the first one, or if you're not ready to move forward. If you're that concerned, then you need to have some due diligence. Why would you buy a house that's basically has structural integrity problems, probably mold throughout the whole thing, and you're going to tear it down? Okay. It comes down to, what is the risk analysis of this buyer? And are they used to these types of scenarios? The idea that someone would just take a home without an inspection is crazy to me. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to represent a client, there is in dotloop under Forms Library, we changed our source folder to Forms Library. So if you're looking in dotloop, it's under Forms Library, all forms. But there's an as is waiver in there, that if someone is willing to accept a home and waive inspections, there's an as is in there, that they're willing to accept the risks of this home, buying this home as is, and that they're okay waiving inspections. Maybe just having them read an extra document might give them pause to say, wow, what am I really doing? Or for you to have a nice conversation with them saying, hey, Melissa, are you sure you really want to buy this home as is? Don't you want to have some type of, maybe you can put in there, you want to perform inspections for informational purposes. And if you find any structural issues or mold, that the buyer has the right to terminate the purchase agreement. Maybe you're going to be more precise about what's going to scare your client. If the well fails, the buyer has a right to terminate. If the septic has failed, the buyer has a right. Again, maybe it's not that you're going to waive all inspections. Maybe you're going to only reduce it to a certain one or two that are the most concerning to your client. But then again, then they might not get the offer. But at least you can give them an option and let them decide.
Mhm.
I hope that helps answer
Yeah, thank you.
question on what I see.
Brittany has a question as well. Raise her hand. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, just pertaining to Ottawa County. Ottawa County has point of sale for well and septic. And so far I've been through 2 transactions where I've represented sellers on well and septic in Ottawa County. And it's in my experience that they are not actually inspecting the septic tanks themselves. They're just inspecting the well and the drain field. And my question is there something that I need to be advising buyers on when there's, if the buyer is paying for that inspection, to specifically say they want the tanks inspected? Or is that something we should have the tanks inspected separately outside of the Ottawa County inspector from the health department, if that's not something that Ottawa County does? I was kind of surprised to see that. They kind of poked around in the ground to find the edges of the tanks, but they never actually dug out the lid and opened it up and looked in there or anything.
I'm not sure how you can really inspect a septic if you're not going to
Well,
open it
that's
up
what
and
I
take
thought.
a look.
I followed them. I was the same guy both times. I followed him around the hole, so I would have known. I would have witnessed him dig it out and actually look inside the tank, but they just took samples of the drain field and did not actually open up the tank.
You can tell a lot by the drain field and the color of the rock and whether what's going on. But in theory, again, if our purchase agreement is drafted properly, it would state in there that the seller to pay for a well and septic inspection, and it might even list the company that you want the seller to have it inspected by. And if you're unsure, then you write it into the purchase agreement. Seller to have well and septic inspected by XYZ company and pumped and tank pumped if recommended by the septic company, licensed septic company.
I think
So there's
Ottawa
some
County,
things
you
that we
have
can
to
do.
use the county to do it.
In Ottawa, yes, that's one of the places where you need to use a local health department, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm just
Um,
wondering, like, if maybe I'm more or less asking, like, has anybody else had experience with that where they've noticed that they're not opening up the tanks in Ottawa County? I don't know how many of you are in the Ottawa County area and have
It's
dealt with
common
that.
that happened. They never opened the tank.
Okay, good to know that it's not, that I didn't miss something. But when you have that, do you generally advise your buyers to have a separate inspection of the tanks themselves?
Usually I write into the purchase agreement that the seller have the septic tank emptied if it has not been done in the past 2 years.
Okay.
Yep. Well, and Brittany, it's interesting. The one I just had in Ottawa County, I had the same experience that we're talking about right now. I had a separate company come in and evaluate the septic.
Okay, that's good to know because I assumed, as a newer
Yeah.
agent, you schedule a well and septic through the county that they're actually going to look
Yep.
into the septic tank. So I was surprised to see them not do that. So I was just curious how
You mean
that.
government not doing their job? Sorry, if there's
I
anyone
don't know, should
that
I
works
be
for the
calling
government, I
them
shouldn't have said that. I
yeah.
retract that. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry.
But
Just
my
so you know.
question, like, should I be contacting them ahead of time and say, hey, look, is there something that either the buyer or sellers that I've worked with so far are missing when they're scheduling this, that there's another box to check that says, I want you to look in the tank? Or should I just be having
I mean, I've asked and they don't do it. So I've done
Okay.
the same thing that Doug has, where we wrote it in the purchase agreement that the seller will do it and pay for both. So
Okay.
so the Ottawa County will come out, do it, and then we pay for or the seller will pay for private company to pump it. But I mean, they came at 6 a.m. and I made sure that I was there to watch the private company open it.
Okay.
Now,
And
and
usually,
this,
sorry.
and this is curious because your purchase agreement allows you to have a full inspection performed by a licensed company.
Yeah.
The point of sale is completely separate. They are two different things. So, I mean, it should already be in there that the seller is going to pay for a well and septic. But I think what the problem might be is that everyone doesn't think of a septic inspection as the same. So we're having a language barrier of what does a septic inspection mean?
Yeah.
It means you open it, you inspect the inside of it for cracks or trees, you pump it if it's recommended by the licensed company. So there's different meanings. And this is the hard thing about real estate is that we don't have a set standard for dealing with septic tanks.
No.
So
Hey,
if
Dave
I can
Goering,
say
ask-
something.
Go ahead. I was going to say, Dave, ask your question on your point of sale list.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of my experience in Ottawa County. I had a house that Ottawa County went out. They deemed the septic system acceptable, continued to use. My people chose, it was during the time where you could barely get any inspections done, right? There was so much competition happening right after the COVID era. And we didn't have it pumped. And Ottawa County said it was okay. So they move into the house. The first thing I said to them to do, I said, hey, have the septic pump. So they had a company out, they pumped the septic. And during that process, they found out that one of the tanks was cracked because Ottawa County does not open the tank. Had we had a company out there to pump that, prior to the completion of the sale, I probably could have got that covered. Instead, I wrote a $2,000 check for a new tank to get replaced because at the end of the day, my clients were upset and they were good clients. I wanted to keep the peace. For me, it was worth writing the check for to have that done, which he was very happy with. And since then has referred me and bought other stuff. It was one of those things where it was kind of the big picture. It's a big check to write, but I ended up doing it. But it was a valuable lesson for me so that now in Ottawa County, because Ottawa County does require that they use them, I'm pushing Ottawa County on my side. I'm trying to work with them to change their process or at least have the possibility of using someone other than them, but then also have them pump it no matter what. Doesn't matter if it was pumped just 6 months ago, because at least that company is going to open it up and they're going to be able to see and tell if there's a deficiency inside the septic tank. So it was an expensive lesson learned for me. That was years ago, but it was definitely a lesson learned, an expensive one.
Two things. Great advice for doing that. But second of all, you got lifetime clients, right? They're going to love you forever. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I've made way more money than that, with them buying other stuff. So sometimes you got to bite the bullet.
You bet. Good man.
Any other questions? Other than that, I want to thank everyone for showing up. If you do have questions, you can always email me, eric@fivestarleaders.com, or give me a call on the broker support line, Deal Doctors. Any of us are happy to walk through any type of situation you have, or just listen to what you have to say. Hopefully I can hear what you're saying and I respond properly. If not, give me a 1-star rating. What do I care? No, I really want 5 stars though. Come on. All right. Everyone have a great week.
He has a great sense
Thank
of
you.
humor, so thank you,
well
Eric.
deserved, Eric.
Yep.
You're the best.
Really great value today. Thanks a bunch.
Take care, everyone.
All right.
Bye now.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.